So what can I say? This was an overall great week for watching anime for me. For starters, I began with Hell's Angels, which is actually just over here, and I can grab it and hold it while recording. So, first off, it was definitely flawed. There's no question about that in my mind. It's one of those really paced, or rather, usually fast-paced but changing pace sorts of shows with a somewhat rough animation. You know, maybe something you would expect out of Redline. Redline's obviously a very, very, very polished version of this, or Dead Leaves, which is probably somewhat more comparable, and Gurren Lagann and probably certain parts of FLCL, kind of resemble it, but you get the impression that people are intentionally drawing things kind of quickly, and it gives a kind of fast look, like it's trying to get you to see stuff kind of quickly, I guess, sort of style. If you're not understanding what I'm saying, I would not blame you, because I'm not even sure if I completely understand what I'm saying. But there's that style, and for me, sometimes that style doesn't work simply because the goal of the anime or the progress of the story of the anime isn't appropriate for that sort of tone. In my opinion, Redline and Dead Leaves are perfect for it. Hells I didn't think was necessarily. There were times when it would have been nicer to kind of take in what the anime was trying to do at times. But at the same time, it wasn't so overboard that I didn't feel it was unwatchable. The real problem, or the real complaint that I would level at it, would be just that at a certain point you realize, well, there's a story goal, kind of. The way it wants to reach that goal seems to change from moment to moment. It keeps you guessing, but at the same time, kind of makes it hard to completely get emotionally involved at any one point. However, for whatever reason, despite all of that, I think partially because this series has this really strange art style, which you can see with Steeler here, which looks more like something out of an American comic than anything I expected to see out of Japan. And there's kind of little vibes to that there, which kind of gives it a very refreshing feeling. And at the same time, despite my complaints about the way the storyline progressed, or the way it kept changing the way it thought it wanted to progress, I thought it gave an overall good vibe. So it's definitely not the highest on my scale, but I thought it was on the more enjoyable end of the spectrum, wherever that lies for you. I've told people I can only do like a 5-point spectrum, which follows a very logical, ugh, I can't watch this, that was uncomfortable, I might not want to watch it again. I don't have too much of an opinion on that. And then a 4-star would be, I thought that was enjoyable. And a 5 would be, that really enjoyed me, I'm definitely going to watch that again if I can. So there's obviously a lot of stuff everywhere on there, and I don't think a bell curve actually makes much sense for storytelling medium, since I think people are better at both telling stories than you might otherwise guess in a random distribution, and at the same time I think people are better than worse at selecting stories that they would enjoy on the scale, blah 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 blah. So on that scale, on a 5-point scale, I would rate this one a 4, which means that I enjoyed it. And to try and find any finer than that, I'm not even quite sure how I would do it. These 10-point scale things make no sense to me, because while I can kind of quantitatively hypothesize how people in general thought about something, I'm not sure that I think personally on a 10-point scale. Whatever. So there you go. Hell's Angels was very, very interesting just to explore. And then to make it even more fun, it turns out it's also a pretty rare title. I'm guessing, if I'm understanding information right, it probably only shared in a Tokyo Film Festival in 2008, and then it seemed like the world forgot about it. These are quotes from my anime list discussion, the few discussions that are on it. And why are there few? Because nobody's watched it. I haven't checked to see if anybody's updated within the last 4 hours, but out of everybody out there, on my anime list, the hundreds of thousands of people, I think I did a little math, and there must be something like 900,000 accounts on my anime list. I don't know how many are active at once, but out of that many people, somewhere between 30 and 50 people have apparently watched this anime. And I've never thought of myself as being able to find rare anime like that, because I have to buy it when it's available on DVD or Blu-ray or whatever. And even if I'm importing from Japan, for them to put English subtitles on something, well, maybe I could be part of the early-ish group that gets the original release material, but this wasn't the original release material, and somehow people saw it before then. But despite that, there's 1,000 people that have put this on their want-to-watch list, and they haven't gotten a chance to see it. And that's the majority of the people who have marked it on my anime list. Anime Planet is even more devoid, where there's 3 entries that have marked it watched. I'm one of them, and another one is an account that simply marks everything as watched, which means it probably didn't watch it, which, shocking. Now maybe there's one listed under watching, so it's possible at a certain point it wasn't listed as, oh, there's only going to be one movie, but yeah, so there's a lot to talk about this. There's a lot that made it fun in terms of being the appropriate, the thing that made it the most appropriate 1000th anime is a combination of probably 3 things. One, I imported it from Japan, which shows kind of an interesting devotion to the practice of just, I guess, putting a bunch of anime in my life. 2, it's a rare title, which means that if people haven't heard of it, then they just haven't watched it or something. And 3, it was good. I mean, it wasn't the best. It wouldn't be anywhere near my favorites, but it was good enough to keep me interested as I watched it, and that was just fascinating. So I guess that's part of the reason I'm putting a lot of time into this. The other is because there are so few reviews about it that I was tempted to add a review to the Japanese Amazon site, or my anime list, but my anime list seems to want to score between 1 and 10, and I'm not quite sure how I would accurately do that. I mean, because if I gave something a 5, people would probably get the wrong impression, right? So there you go. This has gotten an extra amount of talking time because it kind of needs a little bit. I'm one of the few people who apparently watched it, apparently imported it. I'm really surprised that people who are into downloading haven't gotten an opportunity, because it had English subtitles on the official release. Oh well. Can only do so much about that. There we go. Next on the list was a really great anime. So I'd rate it higher than Hell's Angels myself. A lot of that could be that it hit a more personal spot, and that would be Bunny Drop. Japanese name Usagi Drop, of course. And I really just enjoyed it. I mean, that's the kind of thing where if you're the kind of person that could be interested in that situation, you'd want to have your own kids to take care of. It's something I got interest in. I just don't have a lot of desire to explore the routes to go there, and Usagi Drop is kind of a nice way to see some of that, to experience some of that. I'll probably as good as you can get outside of a family member having kids first, I guess, and being able to be an uncle or an aunt or something. I don't know. It's hard to say exactly, but overall, I watched it. I was afraid that there would have to be more conflict and drama than there was, but it turned out there didn't need to be, at least at this point, and that was good. I got to watch it, and I got to enjoy it, and that's definitely immensely a list of really awesome NIS releases. Not sure what else to say about it, though, without talking about details that are harder to talk about. Next up, oh gosh, like I said, lots of good stuff this week. The World God Only Knows Season 2. And I came away from the first season having a really good impression of the series and enjoyed it, especially this sort of meta humor it had, or this meta-ness it had, where even though it's about a guy who's only into 2D girls and now has to use that ability on 3D girls, the truth of the matter is he was still only ever doing it to 2D girls, etc. And that was entertaining. The second season scores slightly higher than the first season, and the first season scored really well. And I would say that's pretty accurate. I would agree that the second season was definitely somewhat better. I mean, I really liked the opening for the first season a lot more than the opening for the second season, but what the second season did just had me really, really, really fascinated with, yeah, this is why I watch anime. Suki Drop and Hell's Angels did the same thing, of course, but, once you're into your third good series for a week, that's when you're in that overall uplifted mood. And I guess the reason why the second season ended up being so good is because it knew it shouldn't just repeat its own formula, I guess. So, and I didn't say it shouldn't repeat the formula, I said it shouldn't just repeat the formula. So what they did was kept the same formula, but throw the most interesting, unexpected roadblocks, twists on the idea of what was going on in the first place, and it was fun. I especially really loved the story with the last girl he had to wow, which I don't really want to list here because that could be considered a spoiler, but I enjoyed that. And I also really enjoyed how the very last episode kind of explored this concept of, while everybody has really, there's a lot of agreement between a lot of people on certain stuff that are good and certain stuff that are not. The truth of the matter is that to different people, there are sometimes different gems that are just completely unexpected, especially for people who get so completely invested in a genre idea or concept that, well, I mean, obviously the guy in The World God Only Knows is way more into gal games than I am into anime. But, yeah. Which reminds me, I should probably talk about that later. But before I do that, other stuff I watched. So I followed up, and it wasn't as spectacular, but it wasn't bad. Like I said, on that 1 to 5 scale, at this point I would have called it a 3, I think. And that would be Dragon Ball Z Kai. I finally watched the 8th set, and a lot of that is personal preference, where for Dragon Ball Z, for me, a lot of the early stuff, probably somewhere in the Frieza saga, just before they start fighting Frieza, that would probably be my favorite stretch of Dragon Ball Z. There's other parts in there that I really like that come in and out, but I really like those beginning parts. So after that, it's not a surprise, I guess, that the really well executed beginning of Dragon Ball Z Kai just completely wowed me, completely floored me. I was very impressed with it, and around the part where I'm like, I can see how this started going absurd, just after that is when I started talking about it in a more mediocre fashion in my videos, and that's a pretty accurate portrayal of, just, I guess, my general feelings for Dragon Ball Z. I don't think it's completely bad, I don't think it's completely good. I can just sort of say, good parts happening, also kind of in ways I don't care as much for. It's entertaining still, and I appreciate its existence in a way. I've explained how in Dragon Ball Z you can kind of explain the major villains in a sort of specific way, which I don't know if saying on here would be spoilerific or not. But, yeah, whatever. I've now finished Dragon Ball Z Kai, and the next step on there is rewatching the part of Dragon Ball Z That's the Boo Saga, or rather, the World Tournament Saga. I think is the name of the saga just before the Boo Saga starts. That leads into the Boo Saga, and I'm very interested in rewatching that. Now, speaking of rewatching, so adding again to the list of really awesome things I've watched, I did watch Puella, Magi, Madoka Magica with my brother, who, well, I mean, I've got three brothers, well, 3.5 brothers actually, but one of them I haven't seen as much since I moved into my own place. Two of them, I guess, but one of them I expect because he's even more of a shut-in than I am, and the other one, I did not know what was going on. I don't know if any of us really knew what was going on. He was in a tough place for some reason. And he was finally starting to get out of that, and so he's been able to come over the past couple days and watch anime. Tuesday nights work best for him, so that's why the updates have started becoming late on Tuesdays. It's also a good reason there's no inside the box now. And the first series I wanted to introduce him to was Puella, Magi, Madoka Magica, because we have very similar interests. Now I wonder if we have very different ways of approaching and watching and analyzing those interests, but this has given me a chance to go back to Madoka Magica, and especially last week watching the first disc, and then today watching the second and third, to just kind of look at the series and realize it's even more thorough, and I don't know if it's deep or just really so thorough, that it explains a lot more about the ideas explored in the series than I would have thought. And including answering questions that people asked while watching without me realizing the couple of times I've seen it that those questions had been answered. It was spectacular. It's a really rewatchable series, especially if you at least somewhat enjoyed it enough to, find the later third of the series to be very enjoyable. Then it gives you a lot to think about in terms of how much the anime did before that was completely related to that and you never noticed. And it blew my mind. I might have said this last week, I can't remember. It's late enough in the night that I just can't. Oh, well, and then finally, one thing I forgot to list is school days, which I've talked to y'all about, and I would say the friend, I think I mentioned that I had a friend who was playing a different route than I did. I lucked out because a 4-step plan of his went like this. He needed to make decisions faster. We were trying to get through a story quicker than I had, so that meant trying to watch it as we get minimal, go back and try again. So he needed to make his decisions faster. He needed to select a specific girl to go for. Those were my instructions to him. And what happened is there were a lot of decisions he just didn't make fast enough, and some of the snap decisions were too nice to the other girl. And then when he realized that things were getting really, really, really complicated from a relationship perspective, he started going crazy with some of his decisions, just intentionally making destructive decisions, which was fun. And then one of the girls started getting really creepy, and he went deer in the headlights for pretty much the rest of the game. End result, I got one of School Day's famous endings. Probably the main one, since it's the one that's the rightmost on the route map, but one of the famous endings. It was quite entertaining, and it's really funny that it was just one decision that he deered in the headlight through that caused it to happen, because we loaded a previous save game, got to that point, and just made a slightly different choice there, and hey, all of a sudden it's a happy ending. Funny. Yeah, I just had to mention that. So there we go. It was an awesome week for watching anime. I don't think I can. I don't think I can top that this next week. The stuff that arrived this week looked okay, but none of it is particularly spectacular. And I imagine I'll be done with them in a single night if I sit down and watch them. So, yeah, there's that, and I guess we'll find out what anime I'll watch this week.